Alright, it's still good morning, Anambra. We're glad to welcome you. Now, it's time for us to look at a topical issue in our nation, Nigeria, and that's tackling electoral law violations. Tackling electoral law violations. We have in the studio this morning Barrister Angante Joseph, who is a legal practitioner, to really help us look into this topic. Barrister, you're welcome to the studio.
Thank you for having me again this morning. Good morning, viewers.
All right, it's good to have you, Barrister. Of course, well, let's just continue because a whole lot is really happening in the country, and about what we're going to discuss right now, I think you're just the right man to talk about it.
All right, laws actually regulate all aspects of our lives. These laws are made to be obeyed in order to check our excesses, and electoral process is not an exception. But over time, these laws seem to be violated. We'll be looking at these laws and ways in which they have been violated. And of course, if we can prefer solution for a way forward, and so, Barrister Angante, first of all, let's look at these laws. What are these laws, electoral laws, that we are talking about?
Yes, in fact, when you talk of electoral law, you are simply referring to those laws that guide elections or election of officers, leaders, possibly in the executive and legislative arm. And I will have electoral law 2010. Unfortunately, the recent one that I've been assented to by Mr. President was denied. So, under these electoral laws, you have so many things inside it, like the expenses. I would just like to give an example. The electoral law stipulates the maximum amount of money candidates can spend in an election. Like that of president is 1 billion. When you talk of the governors, 200 million. When you talk of possibly House of Reps or Assembly, 40 million, and so on. And then there are also provisions to ensure that people who go against these laws are properly prosecuted and punished. A lot of it, the sanctions, terms of jail terms and other things. So it has to now do with how serious are we as people.
All right, I think we'll still get to that, but let's also know who these laws are actually meant for.
Like I rightly said, I've said it is for the executive and the legislatures, that is and even the Nigerians, the voters. Okay. It's not only those people, how people can be elected and how people can now can participate in the election.
So it's generally for everybody?
For everybody,
All right. All right. You want to
we're still talking about tackling electoral laws and violation. Let's look at the integrity of this electoral laws. How well would you say Nigeria has fared over the years when it comes to election? When it's time for elections, how would you say Nigeria as a country has fared in terms of the integrity of the electoral laws?
Quite unfortunate since 1999, what we have been having as far as the election in Nigeria is concerned is very disappointing, in the sense that some of those provisions are not actually obeyed and nobody cares. I thank God that of recent the government is really coming up with prosecution of election offenders Like last week, one Nwosu and the other Tijan or whatever, they were convicted and sentenced to 7 years imprisonment. That will tell you that actually we have these things in our electoral law. But the point is that we've not actually gone far in implementing them. Because if you talk of expenses you do during election, you see that the contestants have actually violated.
Because I know that they are supposed, at the end of every election, they're supposed to put down all the expenses made and submit.
And these things are not done. And when you talk of a governor using 200 million to do his election, you begin to think how possible is this. Because by the time you even put up all these large signposts showing the posts you are contesting, by the time you go from one local government to other to do your campaign, you must have exhausted even more than 200.
Okay, now there's this concern. There's this concern when it comes to election generally, that there's always violence. Now this thing didn't even start today. Way back in 1960 to 1966, during the general election, a lot of violence unleashed on the politicians who probably are coming to vie for one position or the other. And now, if you fast forward to modern day political issues that span from 1999 to 2015, and even now, there's always this worry that whenever it comes to election period, there's always violence among the citizens who are actually casting the vote, and even the politicians who are coming out. So how do we go? What do we do? How do we make sure that this time we practice democracy in its true meaning?
Yes, first of all, people will have to see election as not a do or die affair. It's quite unfortunate that in this country, one of our former president said that his election is a do or die affair. It's quite unfortunate. And that is what we continue to see in the system. Somebody will come out to contest, to represent his people, and you start planning on how to rig the election. You start planning on how to get talks that will help you to carry the election materials. That is where we're getting it wrong. If you can sincerely come out to represent your people, and at the end of the election you fail, there's nothing bad about it. You go home and prepare again. Maybe by the time you come back the second, convince your people. Try to convince people that look at what you have for them.
All right, there's always another time. All right, the program is still Good Morning Anambra, and we are looking at tackling violation of electoral laws in our country, Nigeria. At this point, we'll take a very short break. The program returns after now. Please join us again.
Ojukwezi Igbo gwara anyị na nke a bụ nke anyị, apụga bụ nke anyị. Onye ọbụla tụnye akwụkwọ ya ebe esela ọkụkọ maka ndozi obodo anyị. Ụmụnne m, ka etunyelu ndị niile na-azọ ọchịchị n'otu APGA maka ndị na-ejele anyị House of Assembly, ma ndị na-ejele anyị Federal House of Representatives, na Presidential Candidate of a Great Party, Senate, nakwa Governorship. APGA ewetela anyị mmepe dị iche iche n'obodo anyị. A ga-alụrụ anyị okporo ụzọ malụ mma, street light ga-adị ebe niile. A ga-enye ndị ntorobịa anyị ọlụ, ụmụ anyị ga-agụkwa akwụkwọ n'efu, ndị ga-adị nyafu nyafu. A ga na-akwụ ndị ọlụ oyibo ụgwọ, ndị pensioners ga na-eli ụgwọ fa. Anyị ga-enwe ezigbo nchekwa ndụ na akụnụba na ife ndị ọzọ dị iche iche. Ụmụnne m ndị ọma na-adị mma, ya bụ jee binye aka ebe esela ọkụkọ maka ezi ọlụ. Ka anyị jee binye aka ebe esela ọkụkọ maka ndozi obodo anyị.
All right, welcome back to the studio, and right now we're being joined by another barrister at law, Barrister Dan Jacobs. who's a legal practitioner. Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you, the presenters, viewers. Thank you.
All right, now we've really talked about tackling, we're talking about tackling electoral laws, in Nigeria. That's the violations of electoral laws. I don't know if actually we can get it right in this nation. And Anganti has really talked a lot concerning people violating it, and at the end of the day, nothing it's being done to them. Now, I have this a case that happened in 2015 when an incumbent, his posters, billboards were everywhere in 2015. It came earlier than the stipulated time which INEC gave, and his attention was called, but nothing was done. The billboards were not pulled down, until the election. Now, my question is, does it mean these laws are actually meant for some people? Because some people, you talked about somebody that was, a case that was decided, and judgment given recently. Now, you ask yourself, are these laws actually meant for some people? Dan Jacobs.
Well, the laws are not meant for a particular set, but for all the citizens to bear. But the problem we have is the issue of enforcement. Most of the time, people that are entrusted in enforcement of law into their hand consider certain issues. Maybe they have interest in one party or the other. Because of that, they won't go ahead to do their work. Because that billboard, as you mentioned, they're supposed to have arraigned that person before the competent court of jurisdiction. Do you get the point? Try him according to the provisions of the electoral law. If there is fine to pay, he pay the fine. If the time of imprisonment, he will be sentenced to that time of imprisonment. And other people will be deterred from doing such. So the issue in Nigeria is that we have problems in the issue of enforcement. The law enforcement agents in Nigeria, they are partisan. They're not supposed to be.
Again, you remember the election that was held in Ekiti State last year, where the security personnel, people accused them of using their force to really keep some people from voting, and these are part of laws that are meant to be obeyed. Are security personnel supposed to go to polling booths with arms in this nation?
They don't. The law says they should not. But those of them that are supposed to be close to the voting points will not go with arms. But those that are manning the roadblocks and other sensitive areas are supposed to go with arms in case of eventualities. They can contain it. Do you get the point? But a police officer or a security agent going into the voting point with arms is illegal.
Okay, now let me come to you, Barrister Anyanti. In Nigeria, we know we practice a democracy system, a system that agrees to practice democracy. My question is straight and forward. Why do we put laws we don't obey? Why do we put laws we are not ready to follow? Now, when you look at all that is happening in Nigeria, from the CJN issue to so many issues of the court probably granting bail to some set of people for whatever reason, and nobody is heeding to those laws. Why is there a constitution? Why is there a law if we that have made that law don't keep to it?
I think the point is that we don't have stronger institutions. And even the people we have there to stand as checks and balances, they're not even doing their work. I've said it severally, like you rightly said now, on the issue of somebody being granted bail. If the judiciary as an arm of government will stand on their ground and ensure that if somebody is granted bail, that person goes home. If you refuse to allow the person to go home, that matter will not be handled. If you do it, then the executive will learn their lesson. For instance, I know that Dasuki have been granted bail severally in this country. And up to this moment, it's still there. Likewise, El Sasaki. And the judiciary is still entertaining that matter. And I've said it severally. It's very wrong. It's contempt. If a common man in the street will try it, they will be on that person. So what I want to say here is that the legislature, the National Assembly will have to sit up. The judiciary will have to sit up so that they will work as checks and balances to executive. That is why we are having what we have here today. CJN being sanctioned, being removed, being suspended by one man.
And it seems to me that the case is being taken lightly. To me, because I don't understand. I mean, this is how it happens in Nigeria. We talk about a particular case for a while, and before you know, everybody draws back and allow things to just...
I don't think this issue of CJN will go that way.
You think so?
I don't think so, because...
Away from the fact that he's CJN, we know about so many issues that happen like this, and before you know it, everybody's backing out.
Yes, I love what is happening in Nigeria today. Because when judges were raided, I know I was here, and I say it's wrong. You have a body properly constituted by the provision of Section 158, even 153, created NJC. And the powers of NJC was rightly mentioned in Section 158, that they have disciplinary power. And if you go to Section 292, it talks about how CJN, Chief Judge, and other persons can be removed. So you have to, first of all, refer the matter to NJC. The NJC will look at it and make recommendation. Then the National Assembly will now say, 2/3 majority will say, yes, we're in support of the removal. And Mr. President will go ahead and do that. These things were not done. And Mr. President has no constitutional right to say, I hereby suspend.
All right. Let's get
so
back.
When you look at some of these things,
let's get back to the main issue at hand now. You know, part of the electoral laws that is being violated in Nigeria before our very eyes is the issue of vote buying, you know, or money inducement for people to vote for me, you know. And now we see it being colorized. Some people give it some names. When election is maybe 3 months or 4 months, you see people going to places, giving people money, they call it one name. Then even on the day of election, you see some people, they say some people give 5,000, 2,000 to cast vote. And I've not really seen anybody arrested and prosecuted concerning this law. What's your take, Dan Jacobs, about that?
Well, the issue of that vote buying is provided in our electoral laws. Like in section 23, sub A and B, says something about the unlawful possession of voters' card, offering for sale, offering to buy. Do you get the point? It stated something about that. Then section C provided for punishment. Section 23 sub C said if any person is apprehended, tried and found guilty of violating that section 23 sub A and B, that person will go to 2 years imprisonment or pay a fine of 500,000 or both. But the problem is that the interest, you know, in our political system, the interest, maybe the ruling party is the one committing the offense. The security agents will look the other way. Do you get the point?
And now it still boils down to the question Ugonna asked earlier: why are these laws made when we know we are not going to live by them?
No,
because laws are meant to be obeyed.
Definitely, we have 3 arms of government. The laws are made by legislatures, then interpreted by the judiciary, enforced by executive. The executive that's supposed to enforce that law compromises it at one point or the other. But the problem is that the legislature that made that law is supposed to check the excesses of the executive. If they discovered infraction of the law by the executive and nothing being done, they can take up the the presidency or the government, the executive on that, possibly serve the presidency notice of impeachment for violation of the constitution, isn't it? Because he took an oath to uphold that constitution. And once you violate it, there's no need to be there again. Doing what? You should be removed.
All right.
I think on the issue of this vote buying, it has been there. It depends on the system, the way you use to get people. Even what Mr. Vice President is doing now is vote buying. You go inside the market, you give people 10,000 and trade that money. It's vote buying. And we'll have to tell him, let him hear that. It's vote buying. You've not done this since 2015 up to this moment. So what is your interest? What do you intend to achieve? You want to get people's attention and their vote. So it's vote buying.
I don't know, but I think lately we Nigerians, the citizens, are beginning to understand that, see, if one particular party or leadership is not doing very well, then we really have the power to probably vote them out or vote them in. And we're still talking about vote buying, different, like she said, that it's got different names. Some people call it stomach infrastructure. Some people call it some different empowerment programs. And now this has eaten so deep into Nigerian system. We were discussing something like this some days back, and someone was saying one of the problems is the poverty that's crept into the citizens. Now the poverty is there. If you follow the scripture very well, Jesus will always say, the poor you have among you. But me, I wouldn't. I'll believe in very soon. But the poverty is still there. And this vote buying it's even a big issue now as the election approaches. How do we curb this? Because see, we keep asking the way out of vote buying, but we still know that on that day of election, a lot of politicians will come with better money to get the electoral votes.
Yeah.
How do we curb this? Where do we go from here?
We can do that by having a very sincere leaders that can create job for our youth. Because some of these guys we voting every 4 years, they don't have they don't have people's need in their heart.
Someone said something.
Then once anything you refuse to do in the last 3 years and you are doing it now, you don't have good intention. Some of them are coming up now with bags of rice, a wrapper, salt, so many things. All these things are vote buying. So let's have sincere leaders, people who are contented, that can use even their constituency allowance or whatever and do something for their people.
Well, let's see who is there. Hello?
Hello.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning.
What's your name and where are you calling
Good
from?
morning.
Good morning. Go ahead. Your name and where you're calling from.
I'm Everly from Adazin
Everest.
I'm Everly from Adazin
Everest, go ahead. Everest, go ahead with your contribution.
The issue of this vote by some buy this vote with a cup of rice to tell you how the hunger is disturbing the people of Nigeria. Some check out where someone will empower person with a great donor. You call it empowerment, empowerment. This vote buying, for me, it will not stop. Because
All right. We don't have much time.
He said it will not stop.
That's
why I said it has
remember
been
when I
there.
was small, we used to eat jollof rice that my grandmother would bring from voting center.
You see, it has been there.
All right. Now, does it mean there's no possibility of tackling electoral law violations? If yes, what do we do? What's the way forward?
There is a way forward if we have sincere leaders that will be committed to credible, free and fair elections.
What are we saying? How do we get this?
And how will we get them? How will we get them? By the civil society intensifying more effort to educate Nigeria, because 80% are still ignorance of certain basic things to be done.
So don't you think the citizens are even at fault? Away from let's even take away the politicians.
No, the citizens. That's why they keep on impoverishing Nigerians, degrading our educational system, to make sure that these people don't have the right knowledge.
When somebody, when somebody is hungry,
we don't have
when
time
somebody is hungry, that person can do anything.
Our time is
They keep
over.
on
Please,
impoverishing our people.
please. And that's just about it on tackling electoral law violations as against the 2019 elections. We must thank you so much, Barrister Dan Jacobs, for coming on the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you, the presenter, viewers. Thank you for giving us your time.
We also appreciate Mr. Joseph Ayanti for coming. Thank you so much.
Thank you. God bless you.